Recovery Sort of is a podcast where we discuss recovery and addiction topics from the perspective of people living in long-term recovery. This podcast does not intend to represent the views of any particular group, organization, or fellowship. The views expressed here are solely the opinion of its contributors. Be advised there may be strong language or topics of an adult nature.
Here we are. Welcome back to Recovery Sort of. As always, it's Jason. I'm a guy in long-term recovery, and I'm here with my co-host Billy.
Hey, people. I'm also a person in long-term recovery.
And today we're lucky to have a guest with us, Steve.
Good morning. Long-term recovery.
All right. So we're gonna talk about step 2 today. And so if you're unfamiliar with step 2 in the 12-step program is we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And we started this step a month idea. Last month we did step 1. We got a little feedback. The feedback from Earthlings was that maybe they could not relate so much to the idea of the steps. And so this month I think we're going to spend a little time trying to explain maybe step 2 to someone who's never been in a 12-step program, and then maybe even explain why we use it in a 12-step program or how maybe an Earthling could relate to the idea of it. And I think Billy had a good explanation about some of that, so I'll let him take this away.
So in the literature of the fellowship we attend, there's, it talks about the disease of addiction being a physical, mental, spiritual disease. And one of the spiritual aspects of this addiction idea is that we are totally self-centered, that we never outgrow the self-centeredness of a child. And, basically that somewhere along the way, through early adolescence, we get stuck. And so as we grow and develop and get older, we don't know how to allow people in to help us when we reach struggles. We rely on our own self-serving, self-centered, self-seeking behaviors to get what we want. So, like if we want something, we manipulate or lie or steal to get it. We don't turn to other people to meet our needs for love and support and growth. We rely totally on ourselves, this self-sufficiency idea. And from reading and things that I've done over the years, I think that's actually backed up by some, what I would call scientific evidence. If you do any sort of research into the adverse childhood experiences, studies and things that we've learned about, addiction, how addiction comes out of a lot of these adverse childhood experiences, they actually say a lot of very similar things, that, these adverse childhood experiences will cause us to get damaged in our development, and therefore we don't, develop the skills necessary to live a healthy, meaningful life. And so I think the scientific data corresponds to what we talk about in the 12-step literature, that we are self-centered and self-seeking people, and we don't know. We don't get the skills that we need to learn to look to other people to meet our needs for love and support, to get through struggles and challenges. We become this totally self-sufficient island.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about the step, breaking it down, that maybe some people when they first come to recovery are a little curious about is, the power greater than ourselves, right? So it sounds instantly like, oh, you need me to believe in a God. That's the first thing out of everybody's mouth when step 2 comes up. They don't think of any of what you're talking about, the science behind how this might make sense. And I think one of the earliest explanations I got about step 2, not so much the program itself, because I do think the 12 steps, even though they don't necessarily have to be leading you to a relationship with God, very frequently that is the goal and the accomplishment for a lot of people who work them. But step 2 in particular really does not have that power yet, right? We're talking about a power greater than ourselves, which we often can look at as simply the program of Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous or Gamblers Anonymous, like any 12-step fellowship. The concept of, okay, I can't seem to stop doing this behavior on my own, but possibly coming here and being inspired by you guys that have gotten an extra day or two more than me, and your stories of how you did it and your ways of coping. This power has allowed me to get some freedom from using whatever I use as well.
Yeah, and I remember specifically, struggling with this idea when I first got into recovery, and one of the things, my sponsor had me do was, write down things that are powers greater than yourself. And I remember, those things being like the group of people there. I can do way more with the support and love and encouragement of, my home group than I can on my own. It was also things like nature and the sun, and things like that.
Yeah, stop the sun from coming up.
Yeah, right. And, so it really sort of opened my mind to like not being stuck on like, it's got to be God and it's got to be some higher power, it's really can be any powers greater than ourselves as a good like starting point to like open our minds.
So I'd like to touch on this, growing up, as you alluded to, experiences, a lot of my experience with a power greater than myself was I must be inferior to your power greater than yourself because I seem to not feel like you feel. I seem to not see things as other people do. And that's how I felt. Coming into a 12-step program, getting into step 2 with like-minded individuals that have gone through the same struggles that I have, they sort of showed me a path that was, this is your experience. This is your experience. If you see a power greater than you by breathing techniques or sitting on a river seems to calm you down, then that's your experience, and you're free to explore that. And it's actually been a great benefit to me that they gave me the concept through step 2 that, obviously step 1, I'm powerless, and to seek a power greater than myself to get outside of my own head in healthy ways, such as taking a walk in nature, talking with friends, asking for advice, getting out of my own selfish behaviors and ways that I've developed as some sort of survival technique, because I need to protect myself from these other people that seem to have this great idea of some God that is some far off ethereal thing to me. I can't seem to attain their understanding, and I wanted that so bad for so long. And so step 2 for me, I worked it. I'm a person in long-term recovery. I have been around the step and learned a lot about it, and it's been great for me. It's been a way for me to get back to center as long as I keep looking at it. So,
yeah, I think that I guess if you're an earthling and or someone new to recovery and don't have any experience, and you're thinking about just the power greater than you, we start to talk about God as an acronym, good orderly direction, just somebody giving you a suggestion or somebody giving me a suggestion, really, that is better than the suggestion I already have. We also talk about, group of drug addicts or group of drunks, depending on which fellowship you're in, just people who have lived where we lived and found a way not to, and taken those good orderly directions from them to get where they are, which, some amount of clean time or recovery. I think just at its most basic, understanding, power greater than ourselves. If you have a second floor apartment that you're moving into and you have a couch, you probably cannot carry it up the steps by yourself. And yet you and a buddy or 2 buddies could, right? Simple. Us together is more powerful than I am by myself. And that is like the most basic concept of it that I can think of. And I think that might help people to understand that this isn't some oh, you need to go and find God and get brainwashed
Right.
program. It's just like, hey, together we can do something that I couldn't do by myself. And I think this is how that step could possibly help the everyday earthling in their life.
Yeah, and part of that, I think, like say that addiction, living in that life of addiction is that you don't trust anything outside yourself. You have no faith or hope or belief that anyone or anything else is there to help you. And so the only skills that you have to rely on are whatever you bring to the table,
Right.
And there's a real lack of trust, and some of it, like say, comes because we've had some abuse in our upbringing or whatever, but then some of it comes with just living in that lifestyle of addiction, because once you get caught up into that cycle of addiction, all the people that you're around are liars and cheats and thieves, or most of them. I can't say all and everyone. So there's always a spectrum of things, like have a tendency to lump it all into one, but there's a spectrum of using, where some are more extreme than others. But in general, most of us are around people that lie, cheat, steal, manipulate, do what we got to do. And we think that that's how you live. Like that becomes a normal way of life. My normal way of life when I was using was just to lie on a regular basis, to take things from people if they weren't looking, and we justify and rationalize those kind of behaviors because it gets us what we want.
I was definitely convinced that everybody was either getting high or they were dumb, right? It's one of those two options when I was getting high. You're getting high or you're dumb. I didn't realize that there was another way of life. So to move on from the power greater than concept for of explaining this step, I think the next portion that people question immediately is, the need for a restoration to sanity. So why would I need to be restored to sanity if I wasn't insane, right? And so we could say, okay, well, people in the program might understand their insanity. That's why we're in this program. We've had some insanity in our lives. But the earthling might say, well, why do I need sanity? There's nothing insane about me, right? I live my life. I go to work every day. Things are good. And so it helps, I think, to understand that we usually define insanity, at least one of our first definitions of it is repeating the same mistakes and expecting different results, right? Like if I continue to say I'm going to get clean and get a job tomorrow, and yet every morning I don't do anything different and I go get high first, that never happens. So I just continue to do the same mistake and expect something different to happen somehow. And that's a definite form of insanity if we look at it.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of my line of thinking, was leading towards like that's where that insanity comes from. It's like we live in a sort of we like a lot of addicts live in a place where like morals and values and all those things are chucked right out the window, and insane behaviors seem the norm. I can remember this was early on in like the sort of opioid rebirth of the late 90s, early 2000s. And I had a couple of different buddies growing up where, we were going to the dentist and getting teeth pulled out to get pain medication and thinking what a great fucking idea that was. How smart we were, that we had gained the system by you could go to the dentist and tell them that your teeth hurt. And all it cost you was a tooth to go get a whole script for, 50 Percocets, and that kind of like that's, if you said that to most normal people, they would think that that was an insane idea. But to a couple of using addicts that are caught up in addiction, like that was fucking smart. Like we had figured out a loophole, and you have to sort of search for something outside of that sphere of influence or that realm of influence to help navigate you back to rational thought. And, for me, a lot of times, I didn't trust anyone outside of that realm of people that were using. I thought everyone else was full of shit. I thought the court system and the cops and probation and all those people were just full of shit.
So I, a lot of my development from childhood, going back to that, into this insane behavior, so to speak. When the furthest back I can date it, I was approximately 5, and I wanted to ride my bike back into the woods and hit this jump. And my parents were standing in the front yard, and I rode my bike up and said, can I ride my bike back there and hit that jump? And they said no. Well, my brother was over close to the woods and he didn't hear any of this. So I got on my bike, went down the hill, and I didn't lie to my brother. I said, I'm going to hit the jump. Therefore, he would assume, and I'm 5 years old, therefore, he would assume that they said yes. And we went back and we hit the jump. And when we came back, I had to deal with the consequences, right? So he didn't get in trouble. I got in trouble. Now, that carried on for a long time. It was about what did I want? I wanted to hit the jump for my whole life. I wanted the thrill. I wanted to do all these things. So like you said, I mean, thinking about going to get your tooth pulled for 50 Percocets, I wish that was going on when in my time, because, and I'm sitting here, long-term recovery thinking, man, I didn't know about that, so but those are the types you're describing, although we come from a different background as far as like, I never did that, but those are the types of behaviors I did. And the consequences didn't really concern me. So that was the insane patterns developed over that time. Now, step 2 comes into play into my life. I'm clean now. Body, no more toxins. Guys are giving me solid suggestions. They're carrying me. They're calling me. They're saying, you committed to this. I started to realize that now in the same pattern of living, the same mind, the consequences of doing good things started to become good consequences. And now I have to answer to the good consequences. And that's where the change, a good change started happening for me, because when I even, back then, early recovery, I'd wake up, I'd go sit down at the table, and before this, I never held a job for more than a year. I would go sit down at the table and I would start to eat the bowl of cereal. It's like 4:30, 5 in the morning, and I'm ready to leave for work. And I would think of 5 excuses why I could call out right now. And I just wouldn't do it. There was other people, that I just first, people told me, go every day, get up every day and go. And honestly, I didn't want to show up to a meeting later and have to tell people I called out of work. And then honestly, I did call out of work one of those days and I didn't feel right. I felt like these are going to be bad consequences. This is what it was, a feeling I had. And just paying attention to myself and taking a look at all this, consciously taking a look at it, instead of running around just like, well, I want to do this and I'll deal with the consequences later. Now I'm consciously looking at things and I'm saying, wait a minute, I'm not liking where this is headed. Maybe I ought to talk to somebody or make a change. So
as an earth person, or as a person early in recovery, it's easy to see these, repeating the same mistakes and expecting different results. It was just a part of my life every day, whether that's the person who says, okay, I just got off work, I'm going to go have one beer at happy hour, and then ends up drunk every night when they go have one beer.
Right.
Or whether that's me who goes in and says, I'm going to steal this crab meat from Giant and gets caught and locked up every time I try to do it, right? Like, it doesn't matter. For us, it's pretty simple. But then, for an earth person or a person maybe that's been clean just for a while and not really examining their life or as self-aware as they used to be, this still applies, right? There's a meme that always makes me laugh, and it's the person who says, sorry, I'm late. Traffic is exactly how it's been every day for the past 5 years, and I was not expecting that, right? Like, and that's that thing. And maybe you're not the person who's perpetually late to everything that could easily solve that by getting up 3 minutes earlier, right? But there's something in our lives probably that we just continually do, whatever that is, even if that's the point where, like, I continually cause issues by expecting perfection out of my children and things like that. Like, that's just not working for me. My children are not perfect. Neither am I. I need to be aware of these things and trust in this process of coming to believe to restore me to the sanity that, hey, this isn't working. Let's at least try something else, even if that doesn't work too. Let's not just continually but beat my head against the wall thinking I'm going to get through the door.
Right. And I think if I am, sort of the opposite of having powers greater than myself to influence me, if I'm not using powers outside of myself to help guide and direct my life, I am what's called ego-centered or egocentric, whereas, whatever my best thought is the best thought I'm willing to entertain. And no matter who you are, we all are incapable of making perfect decisions for every situation in our entire life. It's like there's always, going to be whatever you want to call it, research or data or information out there, or influence from other people that's going to help to make things better in some area or another. But as an addict, like I was so ego centered that I was totally untrusting of anything other than myself for any, resources in my life.
Right. I can't tell you the amount of people I've run into that say, "Oh, I really struggle at forgetting things in my life all the time." And then I mention, "Well, do you ever put them on your calendar?" And they're like, "No, I've never thought of that." And I'm like, "Really? 5 years of forgetting everything in your life and you've never thought of the calendar?" But sometimes it takes talking about things. And I think that's another piece where we remember that this program is so useful. We isolated ourselves, like Billy was mentioning, and we don't talk to anybody for good ideas. And then when we express problem areas of our life, we open ourselves to solutions from outside, things we just may not have ever had the time to take to think about that it could work for us.
Right? Yeah, my self-esteem, I think, was so low for so long that I felt like if I admitted to someone I didn't have the answers to something, or I didn't know how to fix a problem, or I didn't know the best solution to something, that somehow made me like weak or inferior to that person, because I went through my life based in my whole self-worth off of what everyone was on a scale of like 1 to 10, and every person that I met, I had to rate on where they fell in that scale, and then how I measured up to that person. And then that was how every interaction with that person was handled. That was how, and all those judgments were made totally in my head, totally based off of bad information, misinformation, judgments that were most of the time based in nothing,
Right.
And, if you were weaker than me, you might be someone that I can manipulate or take advantage of or look to get what I wanted. And if you were stronger than me, then I knew I might have to kind of sit back and put up my defenses and be on guard, because you might try to take my shit or get something, from me. And running my life off of all that misinformation and not just having a little bit of open-mindedness to let people be who they really are.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Open-mindedness is sometimes the power greater than myself, or other principles that are driven home, especially in 12-step programs of all kinds. But these are concepts that can be adopted by anyone. Open-mindedness is listening to someone when, if I run up a flight of steps and I'm out of breath and someone says, "Well, quit smoking," and what,
right.
What are you talking about here? Or someone says exercise will make you feel better and give you more energy, and then the closed-minded self says there's no way this person is right. And why do I do that? I believe that the insanity, part of me is saying that's not going to work for you, or you're not good enough, and there's no way that'll work. It's just a closed-mindedness that keeps me held down. Then I become open-minded, and even if it doesn't work, at least I was open enough to try it, and I then it becomes less and less that I fear the failure aspect of it. Big fear of failure. I don't want to fail. I want to know what I'm doing, and I'm a perfectionist to the point where I won't even, if I don't think I can do it perfectly, I won't even do it at all, and then I do nothing. And that's a negative action. Is not even taking a step out and giving something a try. So it's basically what I started thinking about was these principles are, for me, I'm starting to see that these principles of open-mindedness and willingness to try things are sometimes the power greater than myself.
Yeah, I think just piggybacking off of what both of you guys said, man, the open-mindedness, something we lack in the world today, and I'm not just talking about everybody else, me too, right? I listen to some of these political things by accident. I don't even really want to. I'm trying to avoid the hell out of it because it just frustrates me. But honestly, a lot of what frustrates me is, well, a lot of it's just there's so much misinformation and anger and venom towards other groups for no real good reason. We're just hating entire other groups of people. But some of it is also my closed-mindedness to the message I'm hearing, which happens to not be the message I more agree with, right? And so just all the closed-mindedness around it, I think you're right. Just being open-minded to some new ideas and not immediately disqualifying them because they're not what I believe. What I've learned in recovery, and I don't know if I learned it specifically from the second step or just further on or therapy or who the hell knows, but a lot of what I believe, I didn't actually come up with or decide to believe. It's just what's been given to me. And I believe it by default, and I never fucking question it whatsoever. And the best thing I can do in open-mindedness is question everything that I have ever believed in. And so that's what I try to do today. I'm not going to say I do it well or perfectly by any means, but I do think that open-mindedness, just to hear other people and think, maybe my way is not the only way. Maybe my way is not even the best way for me, right? Maybe there's some other ways that are good for me too, and I need to be open to those experiences. I think another spiritual principle that I've heard associated with this step frequently is the hope. And it's just that voice of maybe, just maybe, I can be better, right? And so for an addict or an alcoholic or a gambler or a sex addict or whatever you want to call yourself, like just the idea that maybe I'm not stuck in that terrible pattern I've been living with for years that's led me to nothing but like insanity, depravity, death, pain, whatever. And just for the average everyday person that's struggled in an area of their life, maybe for quite a few years, maybe they struggle in relationships, maybe they struggle with, showing up for work every day. Just the idea that, hey, just maybe there is hope that this can one day change.
Yeah. And so, when it gets into using like and sort of to circle back to like the adverse childhood experiences thing. So what a lot of times we're doing that to deal with some sort of trauma or pain. Like using, helps alleviate my pain and whatever that is, whether it's emotional or physical or spiritual pain, using helps to alleviate that pain. And as long as I'm high, as long as I'm, having sex, as long as I'm drunk, I don't feel that pain. But as soon as I come down off that drug, I feel the pain again. And, there's no tools, or we aren't taught or given the tools that we need to deal with that pain without our vice. And so when people tell us, oh, just stop using and you'll be fine, it's like, no, I won't. As soon as I stop, I'm going to feel all that pain of living, and I don't have any skills to deal with that pain. And without knowing that there's a different way, that's where that hopelessness comes from, and coming around either, 12-step fellowships or counseling or spiritual advisory, places that can help us gain these tools. We come into a program like a 12-step program and we learn, hey, other people feel this way. They've used these tools to get out of it. And you might be able to get out of living in that pain without having to use that vice over and over and over again.
So I think that it's lead me here to pain is a great motivator. And to a normal person or a person that thinks they might have an issue going on, if there's pain associated, if there's some pain going on, and and you're seeking, right, the sex or the gambling or shopping or buying something brand new, whatever, it's to alleviate that pain. If there's pain there, it's something that has to be looked at, and the truth can be painful as well. And to me, sometimes, and the truth is one of those things that falls under the power greater than me. The truth sometimes is that pain I need. When I was, just to give a personal experience, I was in jail, and I wrote a letter to my dad saying, I want to get a house and a wife and kids and a dog, and I just want to go to work, swing a hammer, and just do my thing, And I'm in jail, I know nothing about doing that, and here he is, the 35 years in, to the job. And he says, well, you just never have been willing to do those things. And that was, that was painful. I wasn't willing to do the necessary steps involved.
Right. No, that's a powerful statement. Sometimes the truth can be the painful motivator to move into the next stage of our lives. Right now, we're going to take a break and play our voices ad, and we'll be back after that.
This episode has been brought to you by Voices of Hope, Inc., a nonprofit grassroots recovery organization located in Maryland. Voices of Hope is a community-based organization that fights to protect the rights of people who struggle with substance use. Please support them by attending their 5th annual gratitude banquet on February the 15th. Tickets are $60 a person and sponsorships are available. Please visit them on the web at www.voicesofhopececilmd.org.
All right, coming back to the topic of step 2, we wanted to start to break down or investigate some of the literature, at least in our fellowship, has some interesting sayings. One of the most interesting things I've found is that it says the process of coming to believe restores us to sanity. And how I've always interpreted that is that it's actually the process of coming to believe that there are powers greater than myself that is the actual thing that restores sanity in my life. And I think that's kind of incredible, because the step says that we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And yet later on in the reading for the step, it's saying that actually the process of coming to believe is the thing that's restoring us to sanity. Not that we came to believe that something could, but almost that the evidence is in when we come to believe that we don't have to control everything. That's what allows us to sit back and relax and have some sanity and peace in our lives.
Yeah, and I think what that does is opens us up to, to simplify, it opens us up to take suggestions and not be so totally self-reliant on ourselves. So many times in life I get in a situation and I don't have an answer. I don't know how to deal with it. I don't have, the right tools to get the job done. And, it's like if I have a screw and a board and all I have is a hammer, well, a lot of times I'll take that hammer and beat the shit out of that board until I can pry that screw out of there. And that's kind of my approach to life. I don't have the tools to deal with that situation, but I'll take whatever tools I got and beat the shit out of life with them until, I end up with a bad result. And I might get the screw out of the board, but what's either of those things going to look like at the end? And that's kind of what my life is like. And by getting into this process, I don't just take my hammer and start beating on shit. I start looking around hey, maybe there's something else that would be a better tool to get this job done. And if I use it correctly, it might be going and asking somebody else, hey, do you got a screwdriver that I could use?
Right.
Yeah, I love this. The process is the solution. Someone once said to me that nothing grows on the top of the mountain. Everything grows in the valley. And that's in that context is that we all seem to be aiming towards something. We want to go to school and get this degree. We want to climb at work or go through life. And these are all things that I've always wanted to seek my whole life, and even clean, still wanting to seek these things. But the process is the solution. The growth comes through the process. I need to learn to enjoy the process. It goes right back to the last thing I was saying about the letter from my dad. He's saying, what he's saying is, it's okay. You can want whatever you want, but wanting isn't the result. The result is the process. The process is, in order to have these things, you have to be able to endure the journey, and that it's a journey, not a destination. I mean, a lot of these things that many people have heard in different parts of their life or whatever, but it's all pointing to the same sort of thing that we're on here, and that is the process of step 2, the coming to believe. I can definitely grab a hold of this concept for myself. The coming to believe is the very thing that restores me to sanity. I'm restored to sanity just with that seed of willingness to embark on this journey and say, I will look for a power greater than myself, or read a spiritual text, or read program literature, listen to a podcast. I don't know, anything. If I'm seeking actively, that sort of does restore me to sanity. So
I love that, like, there's these steps, and most of our program principles and ideas are just written in a way where somebody who's like living this spiritual, in touch with the universe concept of life can take them to have this really deep, incredibly spiritual meaning for their life. And then somebody else can look at the same exact words and phrases and look at it as a very down-to-earth, basic, pragmatic answer to a problem,
Yeah.
right? And it's like you can go either way, and both ways work, and they both make sense. I love the idea that we can just stop using our hammer on the screw, right? And just consider that maybe somebody else around us has another idea for how to get this screw out, or a different tool that we're unfamiliar with. I also love the idea of like that we can project out into the universe that, hey, I'm coming to believe that I can be better, and that in itself is the solution for me getting better, right? I'm almost stuck in the fact that I can't get better as long as that's all I believe.
Yeah, no, it's funny because, here we go again, where it's like, I heard something different there. I took something different away. Like what I sort of take away from that, the process is the solution thing, is what I hear when I hear that is the process involves the actual work. You know what I mean? It's not just thinking about shit that gets it done. It's the actual work that goes into it that gets the solution. Me sitting around pontificating about some shit while I'm on the toilet doesn't really get it done.
That's funny. And I'm over here like maybe in my pumpkin spice latte Starbucks chick world, and I'm like, man, it's just this self-actualization that, like, as soon as I believe I can be better, that becomes a possibility for my life. And if I project that out, then maybe I am manifesting that around me just by believing it. Because it talks in our literature somewhere, it says, as long as we believe we have the ability to control our using, we're almost forced to continue trying to, right? And it's once we believe that we truly can't control it anymore that we kind of lay it down. We're like, all right, I can't. Let me listen to something else. And so I kind of look at that for this, saying right here that, like, as long as I believe I can't get better, which was my belief. I was resigned to the fact that I was stuck out there. This was just my
the rest
life.
of my life.
Right.
Used till I'm 60 in a rocking chair on the front porch.
Right. And that's like the very best.
Yeah, right.
Hope for, right? Like most days I was in the gutter somewhere, not in the front porch. But I really think that just the belief that, hey, this can change. I think that changed the course of my life.
Yeah. And it's funny how, like you say, simplicity so many times of how I actually utilize these tools. Because I personally think, my experience or understanding of the steps is that there are a process of giving me tools on how to deal with life. And it's just like when we had talked about meditation, like I need a meditation that is practical in my life. That's something that I can use. I can't have just me personally, I can't have a meditation practice that requires me to be in the perfect room, in the perfect conditions with the right incense and the fucking music playing and no interruption from the kids and all those things. Because if that's my expectation, I'm just probably not going to get that most days. I need something that fits into my life and how to take these tools and apply them on a daily basis. And a lot of times it is just, as simple as, the first step being I can't and the second step being we can. That I don't do the best job of running my own life on a regular basis, without some influences of some good people that I can look to for guidance and direction and what, my purpose is and what the best way to deal with, my kids' issues is. If I'm not looking at things outside of myself, chances are I'm going to end up making a bigger mess of it than when I started.
And here's where you tell your believers from your agnostics. Believers will say, I can't, he can. And agnostics will say, I can't, we can.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just it. That's, for me, is the point of why I still go to meetings and actively participate in recovery and still have a sponsor and still, participate in recovery events. It's like, just because I've been abstinent from drugs for a long time, doesn't mean that I all of a sudden gained all these skills. I still have new situations, new challenges, new struggles coming up in my life. And I feel like there are things outside of me that can help me deal with them on a regular, on a daily basis.
Right. So I sort of came to believe that I could live clean, right? I came to believe I could live clean. And I started to do some things that I enjoyed doing. And before, when in attempt to be clean and be separated from those things that kept dragging me and taking me in a rabbit hole, I would be clean, separated from them, but I didn't enjoy doing the things like fishing or fill in the blank, taking a walk in the woods. After consciously taking a look at this and coming to believe that I could live clean, so to speak, I started to enjoy those things. And to I tend to get deep. I like to explore how deep my mind can go with things a lot. But the simplicity of it is really what brought me to this place where I can challenge my mind now. And I found out through following those simple, put down the hammer, pick up the screwdriver, instead of trying to beat that screw in, just use this tool instead, Steve. And then I started using that tool and I was like, wow, this is great. And I mean, this is so much easier. I've been wearing a 10.5. I'm on 11, and then you start to feel a little better. And I had about 9 months clean. And there was this guy that I had known. I took his sister to prom, we went a little ways back, and he was younger than me. And he was wanting to, he was clean and he was wanting to really do this thing. And he was going through a struggle, and he shot me a text message in the morning, and I was at work, and he's like, I just don't know who I am, and he was actually on step 2 at the time. And I wasn't a sponsor, just trying to help the guy, so he's like, I don't know who I am. I mean, I don't know how to live. Basically he's saying to me, looking back now in hindsight, he's saying to me, I need to he's wanting to come to believe that he can live clean, and he's saying, I don't know what to do. And all I said to him was, hey, listen. And I was just trying to give him enough to get him through until I could get off work and just go see him and make sure he didn't, screw up. So I just said, hey, listen, man, I know your dad raised you, and you guys used to work on cars and stuff, like, that's you, man. That's you. You look no further.
Right.
You like to work on cars on the side, bud. That's what you do, or whatever. It's like something I said just like that, and he just, man, I was a sage, man, for the longest time to him, because I knew that him and his dad, could wrench on, always were wrenching on a car. It's just like the simple things. He was open enough to seek. I guess he was seeking a power greater than himself, or he wanted to come to believe that, he could do this thing. And we together, him and I, through, some sort of consent, because he would have been closed-minded to, if it was his dad that told him that, maybe, So just because him and I came together and said, I'm going to help you get through this thing or whatever, he was able to see through a simple text message that he could, and he came to believe there, at least for that day or whatever, that he could live clean.
Right. Moving on from that concept, just to another piece of the literature, I think did anybody have anything else to add for that part? Okay. Another part of this literature that has always just really blown my mind, I shouldn't say always, because I completely missed this early on, but it hit me later and really seemed powerful for my recovery, at least. There's a paragraph in step 2 that says, in this program, the first thing we do is stop using drugs. And you could intersperse drugs with whatever it is that you happen to act out using. And it says, at this point, we begin to feel the pain of living without drugs or anything to replace them. The pain forces us to seek a power greater than ourselves that can relieve our obsession to use. And I've always been captivated by this because my first attempt at recovery, I came in, I gave up drugs, and I quickly found women, right? And they were my replacement, right? And it says right here in the literature, it says we begin to feel the pain of living without drugs or anything to replace them, and that pain is somehow vital to the fact that we seek a power greater than. Like, basically, if I'm not in pain, what the fuck do I need God for? Or what do I need you program people for? Things are great, right? I don't need your help anymore if I'm not hurting. And so I was so quick to replace the pain of living without drugs with, the euphoria of a new relationship or female validation or sex. Some people who maybe turn to food, right? And they say, oh, I put down the fork or put down the spoon and picked up the fork, right? And I always say, like, I stopped smoking crack and started eating it or whatever, right? Like, there's always some generalization to make it funny. But the truth was I avoided the pain of not having drugs. I avoided the feeling of loneliness and isolation that I was using drugs to cover up to begin with. And in avoiding that, I never needed to seek the power greater than. So for my recovery, what that meant was I got almost 18 months my first time in, and I worked steps, and I was hitting 6 meetings a week, and I had a sponsor and a service commitment and all these aspects. And yet I still used, right? Even in the midst of doing all these suggestions that recovery suggested of me, because I had missed the God piece. And as soon as I felt pain, I had nowhere else to turn except to go back to covering it up, because that's what I was still doing in recovery, was covering up the pain instead of dealing with it.
Yeah, and I think one of those lessons that is important for most addicts anyway is that, life has painful moments. Life isn't all about good, happy, fun all the time. And even, the people with the best lives still have instances of pain, and, that it's part of life, that we can't get through every day being totally happy, totally, in euphoria all the time. And, with drugs, as long as I was high, that's kind of how I stayed.
Right.
It was an instant escape from all my problems, an instant relief to all my pain. And the only time there was pain is when I came down out of that cloud of euphoria, and then I had to deal with life and was like, fuck, how do I get back there? The quickest, fastest way. And again, learning some tools or some skills on how to deal with the shitty aspects of life, and realizing, like, hey, after a while, like, I'll take the shitty with the good compared to the results of using.
Yes.
Or the things to replace it.
Right.
So the great thing here is that came to believe, and then I personally, and a lot of people experience this, the pain does go away as the result of the process, doing the work, taking the action, it seems. So as long as, instead of, I have a choice, I can replace the drug with a woman or, gambling. I can substitute.
Mm-hmm.
The moment I choose to not substitute, to feel that pain at some juncture, and I don't know, and just as a reference point, I don't want to get into this, but some religions, or whatever, say, the pain was taken from you. Some would venture to say that it was my actions, and the pain was on its way to leave anyway. I just had to hold on and follow through and show up. Either way, the experience of having the pain leave is a great experience. And for me, when the pain was no longer there, whether it was taken or my actions remove that pain, or the process, remove that pain, it doesn't, to me, necessarily I don't need to define it too much. I know that I remember, it worked, and the pain started to alleviate. Sometimes suddenly, sometimes gradually, but so long as I stayed on course, even with deviations, of coffee, extra cup of coffee because I didn't, I needed a pick me up or something, right? So even little deviations like that. I mean, I'm not a monk on the mountainside here. I live in the world I have kids, and I have to deal with things. So that was a great experience. I just wanted to plug that in there because it was hitting me. So
awesome. Yeah. I think one of the aspects of this part of the literature, the pain forces us to seek a power greater than ourselves. This ties in with a belief that I've had, and I know everybody doesn't share it, and I'm curious where you guys stand on it. I've frequently heard God doesn't give us more than we can handle. And I know not all of us are exactly believers in the, big guy in the sky kind of God. But just in general, I have never been a believer in this statement of God doesn't give me more than I can handle, or doesn't put more on my plate than I can handle, or any of those type of things. I personally believe I am always given more than I can handle. And that's the only fucking reason I ever need to turn to God. Like if I could just handle everything I was given, I don't have any purpose to turn to a God. I got it. Right. And so that's kind of where I read into this. The pain forces us to seek a power greater than ourselves. Like I need to seek things to help me, whether that's new coping skills on how to sit with pain, or how to alleviate pain, or how to constructively use pain, or some other thing of reaching out to a spiritual being that makes me not feel so alone and can be with me so I'm not alone. I need these things, and I need something to force me to seek it, because if not, I got it, right? And so what's your ideas of that?
So, well, of course, I'll start by saying I don't believe God gives us anything.
Right.
That's my first belief in that. I don't believe God gives us anything. And two, if you believe that God gives you things, then how do you make sense of all the people that kill themselves? I mean, it seems like they obviously got more than they could handle because they checked the fuck out, and
brutal.
Well, I'm just saying, some people can't life is hard.
Right.
There are challenges. It's difficult, and not everybody can handle it. Some people choose to just keep using until they die or overdose, and that's their way. I mean, are they handling what God gave them? I guess, I guess it's, but they're not handling it in a really good way. So I chucked that statement right out the window. But,
so good. We agreed. We don't like the statement.
Yeah.
For different reasons. But
I don't know if you have any input, or not to poo-poo on the God doesn't give us more than we can handle.
No, I prefer the term universe over God personally. It just seems to fit better from my experience, the way I see how things are. This is kind of, if you want to get into that kind of thing, the universe. So I would have to say to myself, the universe doesn't give me more than I can handle. Right. I don't know. That's a, I don't, that just sounds like an elementary statement to me. I don't really, it doesn't fit where I am right now in my life. It may have applied to me at some other point before, and it may apply later, but right now I can only speak for right now. And right now I don't see the relevance of that statement. It's giving me more than I can handle. I don't think it's that. I see things differently. That's all I can really. I can't go too far into that one.
So since I seem to be the only one that cares about this statement in the sense of a God at all, I will say I soften my stance some, in the sense that when I've heard people say it, I'm assuming that instead of looking at it technically, they must be trying to say that God doesn't give me more than I can do, as long as I'm, seeking the help of God to help me do it. Yeah. Right. That's kind of how I try to assume what they're meaning by it. But I just don't personally like the statement. It sounds like one of those, some of our cliches are so rooted in truth that I'm like, oh yeah, nothing could be more obvious. And some of them are like, who the fuck came up with this
Right.
dumb shit right here?
It's just a motivational statement. You know what I mean?
Right.
You might as well just say you can do it. Like,
Right,
that's
you
way
can
much-
do it.
Just keep going. You can
Yeah.
do it. Just hang on. It gets
You know,
better.
I swear to
like,
God,
that's way more helpful.
If I'd have had the guy from that movie with Adam Sandler that just stood there and went, "You can do it," all along for my whole life, I'd have probably been better off.
Right.
I
And,
like the guy. I said Joe Montana. that humor added a little humor in it.
But yeah, I just think life is my approach to a lot of that is life is life, and we don't. I used to think I believed in karma. I don't even really believe in that anymore. I think karma more has to do with if I'm focused on positive, loving, caring aspects of the world, I tend to see them a lot more. I tend to recognize them a lot more. I tend to be more in tune with those in the world. And if I'm negative and condescending and rude, then I see more of that in the world. That's what I perceive. That's what I focus on. That's where my attention is. And that, those things all exist simultaneously. Good things are happening in the world. Bad things are happening in the world. A lot of things that we place good and bad judgments on are totally just judgments, to one person. Yeah. My wife hates that I say that all the time. That's one of my favorite go-tos.
It's so
like,
true.
It is what it is, whatever judgment you want to place on it, good, bad, and different.
Right.
It's sort of the old, well, I was at this job for 10 years and I got fired and it was so terrible, but then I got this new job and it ended up being the greatest thing in my whole life. And,
Right.
I mean, are any of those good, bad? It's like all the perspective you choose to take on it. It's these judgments that we put on life. I think life just shows up, and whatever the tools that we have to deal with it are what's going to help us, not what judgments we place on how good or bad or how much God loves us or doesn't love us. Or, to me, like, that's just not a helpful way of looking at life. It's more helpful to look at it as, some shitty stuff is going to go down in the next couple of years. And what am I in a position where I am spiritually, physically, and emotionally in a place where I can deal with those things the best when they show up, and I don't go looking for them. It's not like I walk around paranoid around every corner, but people are going to die. Things are going to happen. Money's going to be an issue,
Right.
Politics are going to suck, it's like, what, and what I choose to do with that is what helps the quality of my life.
Acceptance. I think, it's summed up in, it is what it is. It's not, it is what it is not, I see you coming from a place of, it's not a careless statement. It's not like, who cares?
Right.
It's more of, I accept this situation for what it is. That practice, that takes practice. It takes a little foresight to accept. It takes faith of some kind to believe that, okay, money's not always going to be tight. I'm not always going to feel this pain. These things, more will be revealed. These things will go away, and whether that's, God given me more than I can handle, I don't know. It's just that the action of, seeking acceptance, it is what it is. More will be revealed.
Everything is everything.
There it is. There it is. That's it.
Yeah, I do. I will say I am a fan of the "it is what it is" concept, just to kind of remind me to stop labeling things, because it's next to impossible to stop putting judgments of how I believe things fit into my world as good or bad, right? When my true deep belief, if I was to sit and meditate on it and, be on the top of a mountain somewhere, would be it's just events, and how do I give them meaning, right? And I understand that. I do want to say, and not to get too advanced, though, that I also have at times used "it is what it is" as a bypass, right? To bypass having to feel the emotion of whatever it is that's going on in my life. And that does not work. That comes back to bite me in the ass, because I need to go through the experience of feeling whatever it is for the particular situation before I can come to the understanding of "it is what it is." And if I'm trying to skip by that by intellectualizing it or being so super zen with it, I can actually stuff that down and it can help me later. And so moving on to just one more concept that had come to my mind. I'm not sure if you guys had some more or not after that, but one of the things that always strikes me about the second step, and you'll hear it if you hear me share most of the time, it's kind of one of the more entertaining stories that I have in my share, is that I really believed when I first heard the idea of being restored to sanity, my only understanding of that coming into the program of sanity and insanity, I thought of like mental institutions and people in padded rooms, and they were obviously crazy, and crazy meant that your thinking was all over the place. And so when I heard I was going to be restored to sanity, I kept waiting for really sane thoughts to come my way, right? I was like, man, my wife is going to not fill up the Keurig one morning, and I'm just going to come out and think, oh, she must have been busy. Let me fill it up for her, right? And that's not what the fuck I ever experienced. And so I just felt like I felt like I was disappointed constantly waiting for this change of thinking that was going to come to me, this sanity that, as in the way I looked for it. And what I've learned over time is that that's not what happens, right? I have this group of people that speak in my head that are all me in some way, shape, or form, but they're different parts of me, and they're almost like a board of directors at a business meeting. And like the first guy that talks when that Keurig thing is empty is like, fuck it, right? Fuck her, leave her. She's a bitch. You didn't want to marry her anyway. Fill up the thing of water and dump it on her side of the bed and teach her a lesson, right? And then the second guy that speaks is like smoking a cigar with his feet on the board table, and he's like, yeah, he's got a point, right? Yeah. She does this every other day, fuck her. And it always takes till that like third or fourth or fifth guy to be like, hey, if you break this Keurig and leave your wife, you're A, going to be poor, and B, you're not going to get the coffee you came out here wanting in the first place, right? And so the sanity that I have found for me through this second step isn't the sanity of sane thinking, right? It's the sanity of not acting on a lot of that crazy shit, right? Having the time to pause before the reaction. It's not perfect, right? Sometimes I still react before I can wait and appropriately respond. But a lot of times, I guess I might have seen this sanity sooner if I wasn't looking for it in my thinking. And I think that's what one of the things I try to express to people is that my sanity came in my actions, not in my thinking.
Yeah, and I luckily enough, picked up the concept early on, maybe because I realized my thinking was so messed up, was, early on I picked up the concept that like my own thinking is my biggest enemy. My own, that committee we talk about in our head is what gets me into trouble all the time. I think something, I just do it. I just react and just, whatever. And of course, being a person that likes analogies, my first sponsor had told me something about, whenever you think you got an answer to a problem, he's like, when you start thinking too much, picture in your head like one of those road construction signs that says caution under construction, kind of thing, so that you don't really go any further with that thought. And maybe try to talk to some people about it, talk to your sponsor, talk to some other people in your support network, and get some input, get some help with that stuff to help you come up with, some decisions. And that was really helpful. That was good advice, because early on I thought, well, I think this, so I must have to do it. This is what I think, so this is what I do.
Right.
And I thought I wasn't being true to myself if I didn't do that, selling myself short, not doing what I wanted to do. That's what I want to do. And realizing that that's the insanity, is just reacting to those thoughts without playing them out. And the skills that I've learned through recovery are just what you had talked about. It's like learning to kind of sit back and go, okay, wait a minute. Let's not react to this feeling. Let's not react to this first thought. And let's kind of look for some other solutions to the problem. Look for some other answers to this situation. Or sometimes let's just do nothing at all. And we don't have to react to this thing. We can just let it go, Right. And that being a novel concept.
Right.
So the first place I wasn't on an uptick in my life when I came, looking for help. And then we've all heard my best thinking, got me to where I'm at. So now I was convinced that my thinking, there was some sort of error in trying to run things myself. And I also heard there's a lot of simple things that accumulated into this for me. I heard somebody say one time that if you think of it past 10 p.m., it's probably not a good idea.
I agree with that one.
Yep. So I'm very mindful. If I start thinking of ideas and it's nighttime, I still today out of habit flip out the phone and say, what time is it? Is it past 10? So I heard someone say, and I really needed this when I heard it. I thought that it came to mind. Well, hey, I don't feel too great with this whole being clean thing, and I've been doing this for about 9 months now, and I really don't feel like I have that edge, that these other guys seem to have, like that edge, where I don't know. Girls like them or whatever. I didn't feel really good about myself. So I thought, this is the thoughts, right? I thought, hey, I'm going to sell weed. That's going to really give me that edge. And I'm going to stay clean and do it. And I'm going to do it different this time. And I realized first thing when that thought popped in my mind, this is not right. And I felt insane. I felt, what is going on with me? Why am I doing this? And I heard this guy say, he said, it doesn't matter what your head does. It matters what your feet do. And it's the same thing you guys were just saying. It's the actions. It's the actions. I act my way. Into better thinking. Right. We've heard that one. And the committee in my head, it's like, you can't, I wash all my dishes, you can't wash yours. And, why can't these, my kids need to listen to me because I'm their dad. And, and I just labels, and it's my thinking. And the way for me is step back, up out of there, get up out of that committee and just watch them talk for a minute and think, what's any of this going to solve? Any of these answers that I'm coming up with, and then with my feet, take good steps in the right direction, take good action. And that seems to lead it actually helps my thinking, honestly. Those habitual good actions seem to guide my thinking, get it back to center. And it's not all at once. I mean, this is like one thing. I'm a man, so I need to focus on one thing at a time. If it's the Keurig, man, I'm on that Keurig for months trying to figure out how to not smash that thing, So that's
yes.
my thought.
Oh, go ahead.
And I personally think when we talk about being restored to sanity, like to me, that's what that statement actually means is I become a person that my actions and the way that I live falls in line with my values. Like for the longest time in my addiction, I had these morals and values that I said that I believed, but my actions and the things that I did in my life didn't fall in line with those values. So I felt like a piece of shit. I knew I wanted to be, a responsible, productive, hardworking person. I knew I didn't want to be someone that lied and stole and cheated their family and manipulated people and did all those things. But I just kept doing them anyway, and that's, kept me trapped in that insanity, kept me stuck in that insanity. I wanted to do something, but I did something else, and that process of recovery taught me how to put my actions in line with my morals and values. And so that, my spirit could be restored to, healthy, happy, and whole.
It's so interesting. You guys just brought up a couple of really good things. Like one of the things I've heard a billion times, you can't think your way into better living. You got to live your way into better thinking. And I've never specifically looked at that as like a second step saying, but I think it is. I think it's all about being restored to sanity is ignoring or at least not trusting as 100% accurate the thoughts in my head, right? And then the second half of that statement even has roots in like biological things that we understand about the brain now, which is that, neurons that fire together wire together. And so when we do these new habits through living them day in and day out, like you were talking about, Steve, like they truly are forming new brain patterns inside of us. And that's incredible that that's a second step saying, right? And one of the other things you mentioned, Billy, was just the sanity of being able to play the tape to the end. right? Being able to play the tape all the way through. I heard that early on, and I didn't realize. So we started this podcast talking about the insanity is repeating the same mistakes and expecting different results, right? Because all we were thinking about was, oh, I use drugs and there's a relief from that. There's a relief of pain when I use drugs, right? We don't think about the part that comes after that with what you were just mentioning a second ago, like the consequences of that. Oh, I feel like a piece of shit because now I've gotten high. Now I need to, maybe go cheat somebody out of some money to get more drugs to continue to feel this way. And so it's the process. The sanity is being able to think all the way through that repeated mistake to the final consequence of it that felt like crap, right? The thing that made it the mistake, right? We have to be able to think all the way through to the end of that. And I think that kind of is the culmination of the second step, being able to sit still long enough to see what happens after the initial thought. Right?
Yeah. And the other, and I don't know, I thought this earlier and forgot to add it in, but for some reason I feel like it's a little bit important. So some of these concepts that we do, some of these coping mechanisms that we use as addicts aren't necessarily bad. They only become bad because as addicts, we take them to extremes. And by that, what I mean is, I could be having a tough day at work. Somebody yells at me or somebody gets mad or I make a mistake and the boss is upset at me and whatever. And I have a bad day and I go, you know what? Fuck it, man. I'm going to just go have a double cheeseburger and a, shake for lunch. And that's not the end of the world. You know what I mean? It makes me feel better.
Right.
Maybe it is just giving into some compulsion or whatever, but it's not a terrible thing. It's a good way to get through a difficult situation, and that's the end of it. And then I go on with the rest of my day and I feel better and whatever. The insanity comes in as addicts is that becomes just the go-to for everything all the time. Oh, I stubbed my toe, so I must have to eat cheeseburgers and ice cream all day.
Right.
Oh, my wife looked at me funny. Oh, I must have to eat cheeseburgers and ice creams all the time. And it's like we take these normal, what most people would look at as like normal sort of coping everyday things. Oh, I had a bad day, so I want to buy myself something. Well, then I'm $3,000 in debt because somebody looked at me funny on the highway. It's like that's where as addicts that insanity takes us.
All right. So does anybody have anything else to wrap up the second step?
No.
Excellent. I think we covered it pretty well here today. As always, feel free to share this with anybody you think might benefit from it or join the conversation yourself. We'd love to hear your opinions on the second step, especially if it's something we didn't mention here. We can, recap this next week and talk about it. And hope everybody has a great week. That wraps up this episode. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on your preferred platform. If you have ideas for topics you'd like us to talk about or just want to add an opinion, contact us through Anchor. Email us at recoverysortof@gmail.com or find us on Twitter @recoverysortof.